Psychology of people who cut off their family. Picture this for a moment. You're sitting at someone else's Thanksgiving table. Maybe it's a friend's house. Maybe it's your partner's family. The room is loud. Plates are clinking. Someone's uncle is arguing about politics. Two cousins are laughing too hard at a joke that wasn't even that funny. A kid just spilled cranberry sauce across the tablecloth. It's chaotic, messy, loud, and strangely beautiful. Because as you watch all of it unfold, a quiet thought slips into your mind. I don't have this anymore. Not because you weren't invited somewhere, not because you didn't have a family once, but because at some point in your life, you made a decision that most people never fully understand. You stepped away, you cut contact, and suddenly, someone across the table looks at you casually and asks the question that always comes eventually. So, where's your family? You pause for half a second. Then you smile politely and say something vague. Oh, they couldn't make it. Or maybe, they live far away, because the real answer? The real answer is far too complicated for a holiday dinner conversation. Explaining it would require unpacking years, sometimes decades of invisible history. And the truth is, most people don't actually want to hear that story. Not really. They prefer a simple explanation, something clean, something comfortable, something that allows the conversation to move on quickly. Because the moment someone realizes that a person has cut off their own family, the room gets a little quieter, a little more awkward, and somewhere in the back of people's minds, a silent assumption appears. Something must be wrong with them. Because we live in a world that treats family like something sacred, almost untouchable. From the time we're children, we're taught phrases like, blood is thicker than water. Family is forever. You only get one family. Entire cultures are built around the belief that family love is the most pure, most unconditional form of love that exists. And because of that belief, society often assumes something very simple. If someone walks away from their family, they must be selfish, ungrateful, cold, dramatic. But what if the truth is actually the opposite? What if the people who walk away from their families are not the ones who gave up easily, but the ones who tried the longest? Because family estrangement rarely begins with a single dramatic moment. It doesn't usually start with a screaming match or a slammed door. In reality, it almost always begins much more quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. Imagine someone in their 20s. Every holiday season, they drive 3 hours back to the same house they grew up in. Every year they sit at the same table. Every year the same conversations happen, and at first glance, nothing seems terribly wrong. No one is screaming, no one is being physically violent. Everything looks normal, but underneath the surface, something else is happening, something subtle, something psychological. Every conversation somehow circles back to the same themes. Why haven't you done more with your life yet? Why can't you be more like your cousin? Why don't you call more often? Why are you still single? Why are you still struggling? Why are you still not enough? It's not direct cruelty, not exactly. It's something quieter, something psychologists refer to as emotional invalidation. And emotional invalidation doesn't leave visible scars. There are no bruises, no police reports, no dramatic evidence that something is wrong. But over time, the message becomes painfully clear. Your feelings are inconvenient. Your struggles are exaggerated. Your needs are dramatic, and the person you truly are, that version of you, doesn't quite fit here. So slowly, almost without realizing, it too starts shrinking. Yourself. You talk less about your real life. You share fewer personal details. You avoid certain topics entirely. You become smaller, quieter, easier to deal with, because that's what keeps the peace, and every year you tell yourself the same thing. Maybe next year will be different. Hope is a powerful force, especially when it's directed toward the people who raised you, the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. So, you keep trying, you keep visiting, you keep explaining, you keep hoping that one day something will shift. One conversation, one apology, one moment of understanding, something that finally changes the dynamic. But sometimes that moment never comes. Research on family estrangement actually reveals something surprising. Sociologist Carl Pielemer, who spent years studying fractured family relationships, discovered a pattern that contradicts most people's assumptions. When individuals cut off contact with a parent or sibling, it almost never happens because of a single event. Instead, it tends to follow a long period of repeated attempts to repair the relationship. Years of conversations that go nowhere, years of asking for change that never arrives, years of forgiving the same behavior again and again until eventually something inside a person shifts, not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. One day they realize something simple: continuing the relationship is costing them more than leaving. It panicated. That realization can be devastating because walking away from a toxic friend is one thing. Walking away from family is something else entirely. Family relationships carry an invisible weight. They're tied to identity, to childhood memories, to the earliest version of who you are. Worse so when someone finally decides to step away. The emotional experience is rarely relief. At first, it's grief. A deep, complicated grief, not just for the relationship that existed, but for the relationship that never became what it should have been. People mourn the parent they needed but didn't have. They mourn the brother or sister they wished they could connect with. Thought they mourn the version of family they see other people experience so effortlessly. And that grief doesn't happen once. It happens over and over again, at weddings, at birthdays, at holidays, at random moments in grocery stores, when someone who looks like your mother walks past you in the aisle. For a split second, your chest tightens, then reality returns, and you keep walking. But something else happens too, something unexpected. Many people who cut off their families describe a moment that surprises them. After the grief, after the guilt, after the endless questioning about whether they made the right decision, something becomes different. For the first time in years, things feel quiet, not empty. Quiet, like a constant background noise has finally stopped. And in that silence, they notice something they hadn't realized before. They can finally hear their own thoughts. For many people, that feeling isn't indifference. It's something else entirely. It's relief, the kind of relief that only appears after carrying something heavy for so long that you forgot you were even carrying it. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If walking away can sometimes bring peace, why does society judge it so harshly? Why do people who distance themselves from their families so often feel like villains in their own stories? To understand that, we have to look deeper into the psychology of family loyalty and why breaking it can feel like one of the most painful decisions a human being can make.